It's 6:30 in the morning, one of the hottest June days in 20 years at the nation's oldest port, St. Augustine, Florida. An underwater research team from the Lighthouse Archaeological Maritime Program, known as LAMP, prepares to board a research vessel and head offshore to their fieldwork location. LAMP, a not-for-profit corporation affiliated with the St. Augustine Lighthouse and Museum and the First Light Maritime Society, has spent several dive seasons exploring an unusual underwater archaeological site. The research crew is getting close to deciphering one of the last great remaining maritime mysteries of the Civil War.
What we have here is a very unique archaeological site, and that is because it's a double shipwreck site. It's quite interesting. Two vessels, one a sailing ship, one is a steam-powered vessel. Basically, you have a ship trap scenario. Ships are trying to get into the inlet, and St. Augustine has very treacherous shifting sands, shoals, breakers, and it's very dynamic. Now, there's a number of scenarios that we might envision. The first is that one of these vessels ran aground, became a shipwreck, and the other vessel ended up running into the remains of that.
The work session is a summer field school to train future underwater archaeologists. It includes college students, some volunteer divers, and a half-dozen experienced underwater archaeologists. LAMP's leadership believes they may know the identity of the steamboat wreckage. However, the large ballast pile lying several feet from the sunken steamship's boiler stands as a sentinel guarding a complex archaeological jigsaw puzzle. The research group wonders if the unknown shipwreck, part of a double shipwreck site, could be an armed Confederate marauder that waged havoc upon northern shipping during the first year of the Civil War.
It was a vessel that was a commercial trader, a legitimate commercial trader, but it was also an illegal slave trader, and then reverted to a commercial carrier again, and then eventually ended her career as a privateer. So as a vessel, it had a very diverse career.
Challenged by poor underwater visibility, hot weather, rain-drenching storms, and the arduous task of excavating the site, the science team is pursuing a sunken ship whose very name was a symbol of the Confederate States of America. These maritime sleuths are in search of the sailing brig Jefferson Davis, whose checkered past includes cruises as a trader, slaver, and finally, a feared rebel raider. Underwater archaeologist Dr. Sam Turner, one of the principals at LAMP, first heard of the privateer Jefferson Davis while working several years ago for a Maryland-based archaeological consulting firm. When he accepted the job as LAMP's Director of Archaeology in early 2006, his first assignment, undertaken before leaving the Mid-Atlantic region for Florida, was to visit the National Archives in Washington, D.C., looking for any information relating to the construction and history of the infamous privateer lost off St. Augustine almost 150 years before.
What became known as the Jefferson Davis was a brig. A brig is a two-masted vessel that is essentially square-rigged, but she did have one fore and aft sail, which was the mizzen sail, on the mainmast, which was the aftmost mast.
The Jefferson Davis was originally named Putnam. The Putnam was built in 1845 by Caleb Goodwin, a shipwright from Fells Point in Baltimore, one of the East Coast's major shipbuilding centers. The vessel was 92 feet long, 22 feet in breadth, and had a 10-foot depth of hold. Its tonnage, the cargo capacity of a ship, was listed at 187 tons.
She would have been rigged for an extremely speedy ship, which Baltimore was known for having built. similar to what became later known as the Baltimore Clippers.
The Putnam was originally built for legitimate commercial trade. She had a very brief career on the Chesapeake Bay, which was essentially sailing from Baltimore after she'd been rigged down out the bay and up through the Capes of Delaware and up to Philadelphia, and she operated out of Philadelphia for 5 years, more or less.
The Putnam sailed out of different East Coast ports, and in late 1857, the trader's registry was changed to New Orleans, Louisiana. It was in this southern seaport that the brig underwent alteration and was outfitted like a French vessel. That facelift and a vessel name change to Echo was probably done to disguise the clandestine career that Turner believes the brig had been pursuing since as early as 1850, that of an illegal slaver.
She was built in Baltimore, Maryland, which was reputed for building very fast sailing ships. So any vessel built in Baltimore was also a very suitable candidate for the illegal slave trade.
Effective on January 1, 1808, a federal law passed the previous year by Congress prohibited American vessels from participating in the transatlantic slave trade. The law, however, did not address slavery in the United States. The horrible domestic institution persisted in the South and in some border states, proving to be increasingly divisive both politically and ideologically. The Echo, formerly the Putnam, was engaged in the profitable but illegal transatlantic slave trade from Africa to the United States. On August 28, 1858, the Echo, while cruising off the coast of Cuba, was seized by the U.S. brig Dolphin, operating out of Key West, Florida.
The cargo of the Echo were human beings, 318 African slaves brought from the west coast of Africa.
Newspapers across the country published stories of the Echo's illicit trade. Following the capture of the Echo, the American warship Niagara returned the Africans to Liberia, a West African country set up as a home for freed African American slaves. The Echo was eventually sold at auction in 1859 and reverted to its original name, Putnam, and its first career, a merchantman. On April 12, 1861, artillery from the South Carolina militia fired thundering salvos down upon the federal garrison of Fort Sumter in the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina. Thus began the Civil War, America's bloodiest conflict that lasted from 1861 to 1865. The start of this war quickly changed the career of the brig. Several days after the outbreak of the Civil War, Confederate States of America President Jefferson Davis issued a proclamation inviting ship owners to apply for letters of marque and reprisal.
A letter of marque that was issued by the Confederate government under the auspices of Jefferson Davis and the Confederate Congress was essentially an official permission slip to go out and harass enemy shipping.
The very thought of privateers attacking United States commerce was perceived by Union maritime merchants as none other than a revival of piracy.
Well, privateersmen certainly could have come from all different backgrounds and classes. Presumably most of these were professional sailors. Some may have been ex-Navy sailors. Many were from the merchant marine. And certainly there was always the chance at prize money. When a privateer captured an enemy ship, if that ship with its privateer prize crew was able to make it into a friendly port, the ship would be sold and the crew would get a share of that money. So as is often the case, profit was a motivation for these folks. Certainly also you could say patriotism, because they were striking a blow against the enemy of their country.
President Abraham Lincoln quickly condemned privateering and declared that anyone involved in the practice would be treated as a pirate. Shortly after President Jefferson Davis's public declaration to issue letters of marque, a Charleston, South Carolina entrepreneur named Robert Hunter had a daring plan for the Putnam.
And it was sold at auction, and Robert Hunter bought it at auction and kept it for a couple of years, and then when the Civil War broke out, he had an entrepreneurial spirit and started selling off shares in it to change it into being a privateer.
Hunter originally proposed to rename the vessel Rattlesnake.
And so it was Jefferson Davis who actually announced that he was going to give letters of marque to privateers. And so in honor of President Jefferson Davis, the owner of the Putnam and the shareholders decided to apply for permission to name their vessel in honor of President Jefferson Davis.
The name Jeff Davis became a popular moniker for the vessel. On June 18, 1861, the brig Jefferson Davis was commissioned a privateer.
Privateers at the outset of the American Civil War primarily were experienced seamen who'd been on board vessels before the outset of the war, and were seeking the monetary gain of becoming a privateersman, and perhaps either gaining their own ship through prize crew ventures or through the funds generated through capturing ships and selling off their cargo as prizes. They would have been from all over the United States, probably from other countries as well.
In the case of the Jefferson Davis, she was outfitted in a traditional War of 1812 privateer manner. So the Jefferson Davis had, I believe, a 36-pound long gun as the main battery, which was called Long Tom. But Long Tom was a term that comes from the War of 1812 that was used to refer to the long pivot gun. So the Jefferson Davis had one long pivot gun and then 4 carronades, two on either side of the vessel.
The privateer Jefferson Davis was also stocked with muskets, double-barreled shotguns, cutlasses, and revolvers. The Jeff Davis was described as having black mastheads and yards and a black hull. Most of the brig's sails were of hemp, unlike the brilliant white color of the South's mighty cash crop, cotton. The Jeff Davis's hull had a square stern and a billet head. Due to the French-cut sails installed during the vessel's New Orleans refitting, the privateer looked more like a foreign sailing vessel than an American ship. Lewis M. Coxeter, a middle-aged man who stood 5 feet 7 inches tall with a mustache and goatee, was appointed captain.
He was living in Charleston, and he was a pretty notorious type of fella, and free-spirited, and I think they thought he would be a good captain to run a blockade and get out. And when they hired him and put him on as the captain, I think it was a crew of about 70.
The first thing a privateer would do would be get as close to that vessel as it possibly could without raising suspicion. So they would usually fly a foreign flag. When vessels approached each other on the high seas back in the day of sail, it was often thought that they wanted to have communication. They wanted to speak one another. Exchange of news, often position. Where are we? Latitude, longitude. So the Jefferson Davis would approach a vessel. She would say, fly the French colors. She would get as close as possible. They would fire a shot from their central pivot gun, from Long Tom, across the bows. The intended prize would usually heave to. And then the Jeff Davis would run up the Confederate colors.
Several days after setting sail in search of Union merchant shipping, on July 6, 1861, the Jeff Davis came upon its first prize, the brig John Welch, sailing about 300 miles off Delaware. A small team from the Jefferson Davis boarded the John Welch and approached the vessel's captain.
Postal, who was the first lieutenant on board the Jefferson Davis, politely asked him to surrender the vessel to the Confederate States. And the captain replied that he felt sorry to be compelled to surrender his vessel to an American and would not have felt so hard of it had it been to a foreign vessel. And that sort of summed it all up right there. It was an America versus America conflict.
The John Welch's captain later stated he believed the armed warship, initially flying a French flag, was a French man of war. A prize crew from the privateer brought the John Welsh, which was sailing from Trinidad to England, to Savannah, Georgia. The John Welsh carried a cargo of sugar. That very evening, the privateer seized another prize, the schooner Enchantress, bound from Boston to Cuba. The Enchantress had a cargo of pork, beef, flour, and other provisions. A prize crew from the Jeff Davis sailed the schooner toward a southern port, but it ran into trouble.
She was recaptured by a Union gunboat called the Albatross, and the prize crew were thrown in irons, and they were all eventually tried for piracy.
Within days, the dark-hulled Jeff Davis succeeded in capturing 7 more merchant prizes, some only a few miles from the coast of the Union. In total, the privateers seized 9 prizes, 3 brigs, 3 schooners, 2 ships, and 1 bark. Of those 9 prizes, 2 vessels were brought to the Confederacy and were auctioned. 3 were released, 2 were burned, 1 was recaptured by a Union warship, and 1, the schooner S.J. Waring, was retaken by her original crew. The schooner S.J. Waring of Brookhaven, on the north shore of Long Island, was the 3rd northern merchant vessel seized by the privateer. It was captured around 370 miles off the coast of New Jersey. Like the other trading ships seized by the Jeff Davis, a prize crew of several privateersmen was placed on the schooner to sail it to a southern port. One of those northerners aboard the S.J. Waring was William Tillman, an African-American steward. Tillman realized that when the schooner arrived in the Confederacy, he would be sold into slavery. He made a daring decision.
So he took matters into his own hands. And one night, he took a hand axe and he killed the prize master and his mates as they slept below. And then he went onto the deck and he killed the 3rd privateersman who was still on watch. And heaved their bodies overboard. And then persuaded the rest of the crew to assist him sail the vessel back to New York and freedom.
Tillman soon became a hero in the North and was awarded $6,000 in prize money. The Jeff Davis, reportedly the only Confederate privateer to have sailed in New England waters, eventually met its demise after its one and only privateering cruise. In mid-August 1861, the privateer was cruising off St. Augustine, Florida.
The Jeff Davis made the attempt to get into St. Augustine, to thread the needle, to come in through the inlet.
It was blowing a gale, and the captain knew that the Union blockading forces were out there and that he really had to get into the harbor.
So for several days she waited outside the town.
And they made for the entrance.
She ended up running aground on the North Breakers, and that's what spelled her demise.
There is some question as to whether there was a conspiracy to mutiny that was somehow instrumental in the vessel going ashore, whether it be someone loosened a sail or someone somehow interfered with the helmsman. We're not certain for sure, but it could be that there was, shall we say, a sabotage involved with the vessel coming in the entrance, ending up in the North Breakers.
So on August 18, 1861, the Jeff Davis wrecked on the bar off St. Augustine.
They tried to lighten the vessel, throwing some of the ordnance over the side, and that ironically turned out to be an unfortunate choice. When they threw some of the cannons overboard, the ship was pounding in the surf and actually holed herself on her own artillery that had been jettisoned overboard, and that's really what sealed the fate for the Jefferson Davis.
The officers and crew went ashore in light boats carrying the vessel's captured provisions.
They were given a hero's welcome.
High winds quickly turned the privateer into a total wreck. One of the Jeff Davis's crew, helmsman J.F. Carlson, has recently become noteworthy in Civil War history for serving aboard two famous Confederate warships that became shipwrecks. 3 years after the demise of the Jefferson Davis, Carlson was aboard the Confederate submarine H.L. Hunley when it was lost outside Charleston, South Carolina, following a naval operation.
Well, the Hunley was the first ever submarine to sink a ship in battle. It was used during the Civil War, and it sank the USS Housatonic on February 17th, 1864. It was hand-powered, had a crew of 8 people, 42 feet long, and had a spar on the end with a underwater munition attached to it.
Shortly after the Union warship sank, the Hunley, too, was lost at sea.
The submarine was found in 1995. A group called Numa, headed by Clive Cussler, were out searching for the H.L. Hunley around Charleston Harbor.
Cussler's experienced team of underwater explorers, Ralph Wilbanks, Wes Hall, and Harry Pecorelli, discovered the famed Confederate sub after years of searching. In the year 2000, the Hunley was recovered from the sea floor and has since been the focus of a scientific study. Inside the undersea vehicle were found the remains of 8 Confederate sailors. Before being buried in a Charleston, South Carolina cemetery, the crew's remains were studied by forensic scientists.
The Hunley had 3 crews. The first 2 crews died in the fall of 1863 during training, and so by early 1864 they were recruiting a 3rd crew, and that is when Carlson got involved. I believe he was the last member of the crew to become involved.
The research team that studied the Hunley did facial reconstructions of each crewman. The facial reconstructions were based upon the physical remains of each submariner and a genealogy study of the Hunley sailors. The amazing forensic reconstructions show the faces of the 8 Hunley crewmen as they may have appeared during the Civil War.
Something that makes Carlson certainly a very interesting subject is the fact that because his physical remains were discovered on the Hunley and were subjected to forensic analysis, we can actually put a face to this man, a face that we know was on the Jeff Davis.
European by birth, Carlson was 5 feet 10 inches in height and was 20 to 23 years old at the time of his death. It is indeed rare in archaeology that forensic science, genealogy, and other scientific disciplines can collectively shed details of an individual from the distant past.
We can look right into his eyes as if you're looking into the past. We can see some of the personal belongings he had, such as his wallet, the things that were very close to his person.
The search for the Jefferson Davis shipwreck began in 1995, when a scientific team discovered a steamship just off the St. Augustine Bar, probably lost sometime in the mid to late 19th century.
The double wreck site that we're currently working on was identified in the 1990s by a team of archaeologists working in and around the St. Augustine Inlet under Southern Oceans Archaeological Research, known as SOAR at the time.
The first research focused almost exclusively on the steamship machinery, and there was a lot of great work done recording that, and we have a much better understanding of that particular shipwreck.
In 2007, LAMP began its first field season of the First Coast Maritime Archaeology Project, a multi-year program to inventory and better understand the shipwrecks in St. Augustine waters. One of the primary objectives was to reinvestigate the steamship and ballast pile wreck site, particularly the mysterious ballast pile just 10 feet from the steamship boiler, which had never been fully explored or identified.
typical shipwreck in Florida waters does not look like a big wooden galleon like you might see in a Johnny Depp movie, but actually looks like a pile of rocks, and those are ballast rocks. Ballast is what was used deep down in the hold to weigh down the hull or to lower the center of gravity, because otherwise a tall masted ship would be very top-heavy.
Could a steamship have hit the high-profile sailing vessel wreck, thus creating the unique dual shipwreck site? In 2007, LAMP excavated a 1-meter-wide trench across the steamship and ballast pile. Archival research after the 2007 field season indicated that the steamship wreck could be the 1869 remains of the Cricket, bound from Key West, Florida to New York when it grounded on the St. Augustine Bar. The local newspaper reported the steamship was a total loss.
The reason that underwater archaeology can give us a real shot at solving the mystery of the Jefferson Davis is underwater archaeology is a lot like underwater crime scene investigation. This is the way that we can get our hands on the physical evidence that is out there lying on the seafloor. Certainly there's a lot we can learn from historical resources, but really it's that direct evidence that may be out there on the seafloor that can allow the archaeologist to make an interpretation and perhaps identify the actual remains of the Jefferson Davis.
In June 2008, the LAMP team used side-scan sonar to map the double shipwreck site.
The side-scan sonar as a piece of remote sensing equipment is probably one of the more exciting pieces of equipment to use in the field. It's almost a movie of the seafloor. It's a scrolling video. It's a waterfall image that shows you the seafloor.
The sonar's towfish is pulled behind a vessel by a cable that runs to an onboard computer, and the unit maps the seafloor. The swath of the side-scan sonar can cover an area the width of a football field. This technology is the principal gear in finding lost shipwrecks that protrude above the seafloor.
What we see with the side-scan sonar of this double wreck site is it shows us how the site is laid out, and the limited visibility here, you may not be able to see much of the site at any one time with your own eyes as a diver.
The side-scan sonar survey revealed that the steamship wreck's boiler, engine, and propeller were not in alignment as originally depicted in an earlier site plan. Based on this new evidence, it appeared that the steamship's demise was due to a violent wrecking process, such as a vessel hitting an exposed hazard on the seafloor that caused a break in the steamboat's hull structure between the boiler and the engine. The results of the 2007-2008 field seasons at the double shipwreck site led to more questions that LAMP's leadership hoped could be answered with further investigation on the seafloor and greater archival sleuthing.
We still have a lot to learn about the sailing ship remains that are associated with that site. And so we chose to really focus on this sailing vessel and to do our best to understand its physical parameters and the nature, extent, and condition of the site, as well as the cultural parameters, its function, its nationality, its identity, and its date. These may aid with our working hypothesis that this may be the remains of the Jefferson Davis.
So, in 2009, Meade and Turner decided to test a new hypothesis. Are the structural remains of the sailing vessel found below the ballast pile none other than the infamous Confederate privateer Jeff Davis? Had the steamship collided with the large ballast pile of the skeleton of the rebel raider? The 2009 project would be the most intensive shipwreck study ever undertaken by LAMP, and the results could rewrite Civil War history.
An archaeological field school is a long-standing tradition in the training of professional archaeologists. It's how most of us learned the skills that we are now putting to practice as professionals. Our field school has kind of a dual purpose. Certainly, we're here to educate these young people. The other goal, of course, is to actually get some research done and hopefully be able to identify it one way or another as the Jefferson Davis.
The field school attracted students from several colleges and universities. One of the key ingredients for the field school was the loan of the RV Roper, a vessel supplied by the not-for-profit corporation, the Institute of Maritime History. The field school's archaeological investigation was conducted under a permit issued by the state of Florida. A typical field school day consisted of the team arriving before daybreak at the Lamp office to gather equipment and then to go to a nearby public dock to load the gear onto one of several research boats. While the 36-foot-long roper went out to the double shipwreck site, other smaller vessels were used to conduct magnetometer and side-scan sonar mapping. The investigative approach was not to just focus upon the double shipwreck site, but to also search for other shipwrecks in St. Augustine waters. Field school students, volunteers, and underwater archaeologists spent hours planning dives, scuba diving, and debriefing. Many in the team were not familiar with the double shipwreck site. Before the students dived the site, archaeologists provided intensive instruction on safety measures associated with black water scientific diving.
When the students got here, we did a couple of days of orientation, and that included basic things like an operation plan and how do you behave on a boat. We took them to the pool for several days, tested their swimming skills, tested their scuba skills, and then set up an obstacle course for them and blacked out their masks so that they would sort of get a feel for what it's like.
And then we moved on to learning basic skills, how to map things, how to properly identify them underwater, taking notes to make sure you know what you were looking at and so they can be described. You also have to learn that things are just much more difficult than they would be on land.
Following pool work training, the students made several dives to acquaint themselves with the site. Visibility was generally less than 2 to 3 feet. All dives were choreographed before any divers went into the water. A 3-point mooring system was established at the double shipwreck site to secure the research vessel's position directly over the excavation area. In 2009, the research team placed a grid over the ballast pile to control their work.
The way that we are approaching this particular shipwreck site is to excavate a trench directly across the ship from one side to another. We'd worked on this same site in 2007, and we exposed some of the frames or ribs of the vessel, so we know the orientation of the ship, and so we use that data in order to lay in this trench in a way that would be most advantageous for us to learn more about the hull remains of this ship. And it's quite likely that we will be finding some artifacts that might give us a clue to the age of the vessel, the nationality of the vessel, that kind of thing.
Each day, the students and underwater archaeologists kept detailed notes of the fieldwork. Following daily fieldwork, students often had evening lectures.
In the evenings, there are lectures when we come back off the boat. And that can be a real test of endurance as well, because spending hours in the sun on a rocking boat wears you out, and then you've got to come home and listen to somebody talk for a couple hours. But that's all part of it, and that's part of what we're trying to train them to do.
The focus of the 2009 fieldwork centered on the ballast pile and the hull structure below the ballast. Slowly, the ballast stones covering the hull structure were removed. The ballast was transported to the Lamp complex, where the stones were counted, photographed, weighed, and stored.
There are things that ballast stones can tell us. We can do geological analysis on some of these stones, and we may get clues to the origins of the rock, which would in turn provide possible clues to the origins of the ship, or at least where the ship loaded up this ballast.
Following the fieldwork to map the wooden shipwreck, much of the ballast was put back to cover and protect the recently exposed hull structure. Archaeologists hoped that the exposed hull timbers would reveal secrets of the shipwreck's identity.
I mean, it's a very interesting hull. I mean, you know, in one sense, it was very artifact poor. We didn't find very artifacts in this trench. But on the other hand, we sure did get a lot of information on the construction of this vessel.
It's hull rich. Archaeologically, there are a number of things that we're looking for that might prove or point to the identification of this shipwreck as the Jefferson Davis. Specifically, the 2 carronades that were jettisoned would be, pardon the pun, the smoking gun that would really identify this vessel as the Jefferson Davis. We would find them under the hull. They were jettisoned the vessel beat on these cannons, and that is ultimately what caused her demise.
The hull remains itself can also tell archaeologists a lot. The shape of the hull often can indicate if this was a merchant vessel or if it was a vessel that was built for speed or a vessel built for war. In the case of the Jeff Davis, you have a bit of a combination of all three of these. So we would expect a much sharper shape to the hull, and you know, it may be that we're going to find that.
A pivot gun track would also be indicative of a central pivot gun. It was not a common item on most merchantmen. So we were also looking for second half of the 19th century artifacts, well, mid-century artifacts.
For several weeks after the summer field school, LAMP volunteers and archaeologists continued to explore the site, looking for answers to the many research questions about the wreck of the unknown sailing craft.
It was a successful field season by any measure. We logged more than 397 hours of diving time, which is a real accomplishment. But certainly in our waters, when you can't see very much, you have to have that kind of time to record with the accuracy that we need to as archaeologists. So now we have all this data. We've begun to send things off to different laboratories.
At these laboratories, some of the best scientific sleuths in the nation have been analyzing shipwreck finds to get a clearer picture as to the identity of the sunken sailing vessel. Artifacts found during the fieldwork give insight into the possible time period of the submerged watercraft.
We didn't have too many artifacts, but we did have a few that were diagnostic. One ceramic sherd was dated by the city archaeologist of St. Augustine to the late 1800s, so that's the latest time period we have. We have a piece of glass that looks like it might be from a whale oil lamp of a style perhaps dating between the 1840s and 1870s. Basically, most of what we found so far is pointing to a date range in the second half of the 19th century.
Wood samples from the sunken hull timbers were sent to the University of West Florida for analysis under the direction of Dr. Amy Mitchell Cook.
We've taken frame and plank samples, and we're having those analyzed at the University of West Florida. And this will just give us a makeup of the woods that went into the construction of this vessel. If it's got maple, white oak, and other northern species, it might actually eliminate it as well because it might be a New England build. So we're looking for a wood signature that would say Mid-Atlantic, sort of Maryland area.
Small animal bones recovered during the excavation have been sent to Dr. Tanya Paris at Middle Tennessee State University.
And that'll tell us perhaps some of the supplies that were consumed on board, the presence of vermin on board, that sort of thing.
Ballast stones that were removed from above the hull structure could be of significant interest.
Ballast stones are another inquiry, another analytic study that is being carried out right now by the state geologist of New York is to look at these ballast stones. And we kept quite a sizable sample, several hundred stones. Of those, we selected a good sample to be looked at, to be broken open, thin section analysis, so it can give us, as good as we can tell, the origin of these particular stones.
And what we were looking to find is the geographic area that these stones came from. Now, ballast is a difficult thing because ballast traveled a lot. A vessel would take on ballast if it didn't have a very heavy cargo to carry out of a port. So it would carry a lot of stone ballast to keep its center of gravity low. It would travel to another port where that ballast would be unloaded. Another vessel would later pick up that ballast. Ports have ballast banks. St. Augustine is no exception.
At the State Museum in Albany, New York, Dr. William Kelly, the state geologist, conducted an in-depth geological analysis that may help in solving the mystery of the Jefferson Davis shipwreck.
We do basic research. We basically provide unbiased geological information for anybody who needs it. Where could these rocks have come from? And most of the rocks that were in the ballast here could have come from the east coast of North America. There's sedimentary rocks in the ballast, there's igneous rocks in the ballast, and there's metamorphic rocks in the ballast. They're tough rocks because think about how these rocks had to get to somewhere near the coast. They had to be formed, let's say in the Appalachians. They had to be weathered out of the rocks in the mountains, carried down streams, and carried by floods or whatever down somewhere near the coast to be picked up and eventually used as ballast. Leaving aside the question of the ballast piles that could have been brought in by foreign ships.
Unfortunately, the ballast was too generic to give a fingerprint to identify the possible origin of the sailing vessel wreck.
All the time I was doing this, I was trying to put myself into the mind of a ship's captain ballasting and unballasting his vessel, picking up rocks, dropping off rocks. It would be interesting to take the ballast pile apart stratigraphically and to get the stuff that's on the bottom, which might have been the material that she was initially ballasted with. That would be handy to know.
Another analysis was a metallurgical study undertaken at the Clemson Conservation Center in Charleston, South Carolina, the laboratory that is conserving the Confederate submarine Hunley.
We have an ongoing issue or an ongoing possibility that we may not have two separate shipwrecks, but perhaps just one shipwreck. In order to definitively prove that the ballast pile wreck is a separate vessel than the steamboat wreck, we have a few avenues of inquiry. One of them is through its fasteners. We are doing a chemical analysis of fasteners that were removed in 1997 from the hull of the wooden hull of the steamship wreck. And then we have fasteners that we, of course, recovered during our excavation. So if those appear to be a perfect chemical match, well, that might cause us to rethink our hypothesis that this is two shipwrecks.
The Clemson Conservation Center has offered to study some of the metal artifacts from the double shipwreck site.
This is a perfect example of why we're here, and what we want to do is learn from the artifacts coming out of the Jefferson Davis wreck, because they're new to us. By other people bringing us problems, we learn much more about how to deal with our problems.
A state-of-the-art scanning electron microscope that does nanoscale imaging is being used to determine the metal composition of copper and copper alloy artifacts retrieved from the double shipwreck site. This might reveal details as to the construction dates for both shipwrecks.
We receive two sets of artifacts from the steamboat ship and the ballast pile. The ballast pile supposedly might be the Jefferson Davis, and we are looking at their composition to look if we have copper or copper alloy. We actually got several types of composition, either pure copper or copper and zinc, or copper, zinc and tin, or copper and tin. It's really artifact based or specific, and that will require more historic research on the lamp part to determine which artifact come from which shipwreck.
Unfortunately, no major diagnostic clue was uncovered during the metallurgical study.
We're the detectives that are going to put these clues together and come up with a scenario that seems to make sense for our vessel. But what we know right now is that we believe this vessel is probably a medium-sized sailing vessel. It has very interesting construction features. It's very robustly built. This most likely was a sheathed vessel. This technology basically became widespread by the 19th century. We have saw marks on some of the hull timbers from a bandsaw. That technology did not exist before 1808. Basically, we know our vessel could not have been built before 1808.
In a nutshell, we can't say if it is the Jefferson Davis, but we can't say it's not the Jefferson Davis.
We have certainly always been interested in finding the Jefferson Davis. It goes without saying that this vessel is of utmost national importance and certainly important to the history of the oldest port in the U.S. But if we decide that we do not think this is a Jefferson Davis, we're certainly not going to quit and stop diving and stop our archaeological research programs. This is a major shipwreck and we're very interested in looking for it. We have other targets out there that we've already identified. Any of them could prove to be this holy grail of St. Augustine shipwrecks.
The story for the Jefferson Davis shipwreck is the tale of a diverse people. Seafaring merchants, displaced and enslaved Africans, and Americans in conflict with themselves. After the privateer Jefferson Davis wrecked in August 1861, some northern newspapers erroneously reported that the Confederate president himself had unexpectedly died. For a moment, some northerners were relieved that, with President Davis's death, the Confederacy would crumble. Unfortunately, as more accurate details of the privateer's destruction surfaced, Northern optimism soon disappeared. The Confederacy's most successful privateer had sunk, victimized by strong winds off the nation's oldest port. The winds of war would continue for another 3.5 years. The archaeological investigation in the ocean sands off St. Augustine, Florida, is in reality a quest to examine oneself. For embodied in this shipwreck, the Jefferson Davis, is a pursuit by dedicated scientists to uncover the past, and in so doing, gain a greater understanding of the melting pot of people we call the United States of America.
We will continue doing survey and using all of the high-tech equipment at our availability to do the best we can to solve this mystery. She's out there somewhere, and we have the tools that would let us find her. So this search will continue.